Since the beginning of our species, humans have been perplexed by our own minds. We have a natural curiosity about ourselves. And while we typically consider our thoughts to be our own, they are influenced by a number of factors, such as genetics and upbringing. I'm going to show you a few images, and I would like you to tell me what you see. If you look at this from one perspective, you can see a duck. This is its head, this is the eyeball, and this is the beak. But from another perspective, you can see a rabbit. This is also the head, but this time it's facing this way, and this is the eyeball, and the beak becomes the rabbit ears. What about this one? From one perspective, you can see a young woman. This is her chin, this is the ear, this is the nose, and this is the eyelash looking this way. But from another perspective, you can see an old woman. The ear becomes the eye, the chin becomes the nose, and her necklace becomes the mouth. These are called optical illusions, and they're an easy way to prove that we can have different perceptions of the same reality. So what about this image? Most people see a bat, a butterfly, or a moth. But this is not an optical illusion at all. This is an ink blot test developed by Hermann Rorschach in 1921, and he would examine your personality and emotional functioning based on how you respond. These days, the test is considered questionable at best. I'm working towards my degree in psychology, and this is the stuff that I'm truly fascinated by. My goal with this presentation is to give a brief history of psychology to garner some appreciation of the subject. First, I will talk about some of the philosophers who first discussed psychology. Second, I will talk about the first psychologists who popularized the subject. And third, I will talk about how psychology is used today. As I've said, people have been talking about psychology since the beginning of our species. But let's fast forward to the 4th century BC, when Greek philosophers came up with their theories on the subject. Plato divided the psyche, which was Greek for soul, into 3 sections. Simplifying the terms, they are your reason, located in the head, your emotions, located in the chest, and your desires, located in the stomach. And all these parts can conflict with one another. Aristotle, on the other hand, thought that your consciousness was in the heart, because it's the central organ of the body. Meanwhile, Hippocrates had already theorized that the brain is the source of consciousness, but many people didn't believe him. Medicine eventually evolved to prove the functions of all of our organs, including the brain being the seat of consciousness. For a long time, it was thought that psychology couldn't be a separate field from philosophy, since it couldn't be quantified. But this all changed in the 1800s. There are many great figures during this time, but I'm going to talk about the main psychologists who advanced the field. In 1879, Wilhelm Wundt created the first laboratory for psychology at the University of Leipzig in Germany. This was the first time psychology was studied as a separate subject from philosophy, using observable data. Around this time, Sigmund Freud became the most famous and perhaps infamous psychologist in the world. Like Plato, he also believed the mind was divided into 3 sections. We have the id, representing our unconscious instincts, the superego, representing our beliefs and morality, and the ego, always trying to reconcile between the two. He believed that sex is a person's highest motivation, and most of his theories revolved around that. He believed that personality developed through stages of resolved and unresolved sexual conflicts in childhood. The most famous part of this theory is that he believed that children have an unconscious sexual desire for their opposite sex parent, and therefore develop a jealousy and hatred toward their same-sex parent. His theories weren't always accurate and generated a lot of controversy, but he was the first person talking about child development or the unconscious at all. He is the pioneer for psychoanalysis, which became massively popular and is the basis for psychotherapy as it is used today. From here, psychology blossoms into various subfields and society's perception of mental health shifts. And here's where I talk about modern applications of psychology. While ancient treatments of mental illness might include exorcisms, isolation, and lobotomies, modern treatments of mental illness are usually a combination of psychiatric medication and psychotherapy. It's worth noting here that psychiatrists are medical doctors, and along with therapy can prescribe medication and run tests. Many psychiatrists don't do therapy at all. They might only see you for about 15 minutes. On the other hand, therapists usually spend an hour with you to work on programs to improve your mood and behavior, but they cannot prescribe medication or run tests because they are not medical doctors. The first edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM, came out in 1952, and it has become the standard for diagnosing mental disorders. It continually gets revised to add disorders and remove conditions no longer considered to be mental disorders, and we are currently in its 5th edition. Some psychologists are more interested in observable behavior rather than internal mental life. In the 1900s, psychologists like John B. Watson and B.F. Skinner popularized behavioral psychology, and advancements in the field continue to make psychology a more objective science. As you can see, the brain is a complex organ, and we've only recently begun to understand its capabilities. I showed you how philosophers pondered the mind, then I showed how psychology became its own study, and the psychologists who first made advancements in the field, and then I showed how psychology is used today. Hopefully you understand more about the history of psychology and gain more respect for this vast field of knowledge. And may you continue to use psychology to benefit yourself and others. Thank you.